athletic field, when we see them compete and succeed at the next level, it's just awesome. And there's been times, specifically this past Saturday against Northwestern, the lineup that Fred really rolled with when Nebraska took control of that game, Braden Frager was on the court, Sam Hoiberg was on the court, and Cale Jacobson was on the court. Like, my heart is all warm and fuzzy when I see that. It is so cool because you have Pius, Ashland Greenwood, and Lincoln Southwest, and guys that we have done interviews with well before they even put on a Nebraska uniform. So cool. And to also watch each of those three just refine their skills and develop and be able to compete at the next level. I don't know that I would have expected any of those three to play at the level in which they are this season if you rewind the clock 4 years. In fact, it was, I think, either December or maybe early January, I did a one-on-one with Sam. And as I was setting up the camera, he even jokingly said to me, it's just like, what is this, 4 or 5 years ago when we're at Pius all over again? Like, he remembers those too, you know? It wasn't too long ago that at these Pius games, we're scanning the crowd and we're trying to find the cutaway shot of Fred Hoiberg, Dad Fred Hoiberg, in the crowd just watching his boys play.
Was he more animated at the high school games than he gets sometimes for the
No.
college ones?
No, he was frustrating as a spectator at high school
I
because
was going to say, you're not going to get the reaction shot.
No, you didn't even know that it was video. You would have thought it was a still photo because he would sit there and not show any expression. He wouldn't move, and he would just blend in with the crowd. We always knew to look for Fred in the parent section about 5 rows from the very top. But he never even had like big Nebraska gear on. You know, sometimes you can look for where's the red speck of red in all the black or all the green, but that was never the case with Fred Hoiberg. Now to your point about Sam Hoiberg and where he might rank in terms of these postseason accolades, I've said this multiple times, Mike. I think he's the Big Ten's Defensive Player of the Year. I really do. And I'm not trying to just like show some bias or lather up like or just say I've got these goggles on and I'm so enamored with the local team that's succeeding. If you look at his numbers, they support it. And I don't know that the numbers, he's second in the Big Ten in steals. He ranks nationally in steals. And the numbers don't fully show everything that Sam Hoiberg does from a defensive standpoint because he has such active hands and he jumps passing lanes and he's good on a switch on a screen. You know, there are some times like he gets mismatched, but he plays about 6 inches bigger than what he is. If there's a big who has the ball that can handle it and he's on the perimeter, like Sam kind of puffs out his chest a little bit and he's like, let's go. Like he welcomes that one-on-one scenario. I think he's definitely all Big Ten this year. And in my opinion, with 3 weeks left in the regular season, I think that Sam Hoiberg is the Big Ten's Defensive Player of the Year as of right now.
I want to take a second here and welcome everybody that was able to join. We had like a technical snafu, so it was just Kevin and I talking to ourselves for a little bit until we were able to kind of welcome in our audience. So if you were a little confused as to what happened there, that is why. But we were discussing kind of Kevin's relationship with Sam Hoiberg, someone that he has been able to cover from his time at Pius and now into this career at Nebraska. And Kevin, like one of the things that I'm wondering, because you're on the baseline, you might see this through the viewfinder, you might see it on the TV broadcast, so I think it's a little harder. It's easier when you are behind the basket. The anticipation of which he plays with and how he sometimes baits teams by the way that when the ball is on the far side away from him, and he will drop down into almost a help position or try to hide himself behind rink mass. So then they go for that skip pass, and there's Sam floating through the air. You see Berkay do it on the other side, too. I think that's one of the reasons Nebraska's defense has been so much better this year is that they have these guys who have sort of almost a knack like they're a free safety playing a deep coverage, like they're Ed Reed back there tracking the ball. It's not just quick hands taking it away from guards, and Sam can do that too. They sort of trap teams into getting lackadaisical or overly reliant on the skip pass, and they're going to catch you. It's just a matter of time. Even Purdue, which played about as clean of a first 30 minutes as you could have, when it flipped on them, Nebraska was suddenly avalanching them with their defense, and they couldn't make simple basketball plays. And I think Sam's a huge part of that.
Yeah, Sam's pesky in the backcourt. The play that probably comes to mind for your viewers and listeners, Mike, is the play at the end of the Northwestern game. That was really the dagger where, Northwestern got careless with the basketball. Sam kind of sneaks around, gets the steal, and then he drops a pass off, and Price finishes just a quick two. It was really awesome. That kind of summed up, him and the way he plays defense. But to your point about the way that he can play the free safety spot, I feel like sometimes – he's inside the top of the key and he's just waiting for a team as they bring the ball across midcourt to throw to the opposite wing. And he is just licking his chops. I don't know if that's through film study or it's just the fact that he is a coach's kid and knows the game so incredibly well. He just has an amazing ability to know where the basketball is going before there's any hint of where the basketball is going. And if Sam Hoiberg, and I'm not trying to shame him here, if he could dunk the basketball, he would be everywhere because he's had so many runouts this season where he will pick the ball off on that skip pass or he will create some sort of turnover and then has a lane to the hoop. And if he could rise above and jam it, like he's on SportsCenter pretty regularly here. But he's laying it in and, no one's going to be upset about an easy two from Sam Hoiberg at any point in time. And his offensive numbers, Mike, they've really picked up. It used to be earlier in the year when he was getting double figures. You're like, we got 10 or 12 out of Sam Hoiberg. Now, whatever the past 8 games, he's averaging 12, I believe.
Right. And it's the assertiveness and the ability to finish around the rim that has really taken him from, this is kind of a cool, fun story. He's maybe the first guy off the bench, or you reliably can have him play a bunch of minutes, but you're not going to count on him, to he will take guys off the drive, weed through traffic, go up and under, and then finish. And he has moments like he had on Saturday against Northwestern where it's like, that didn't quite look what he intended. But he's had some of the more impressive finishes around the rim than some of Nebraska's other guys. I mean, outside of Frager, they don't have a lot of guys that are just going to throw it down. I mean, Berke might every now and then, but for the most part, you got a lot of guys who they're just going to finish with the finger roll or they're going to finish nicely off the glass. His ability to go up and under, and we've seen it from Kale too. Again, defenders don't think that he has that in his bag. They just don't think the athleticism and the hang time is going to match up with this 6-foot kid from Nebraska that they probably only ever really watched in film study and just assume that he's playing because his dad's the coach. Like, there's just so much more to his game. And then he's gotten more comfortable taking the open 3-pointer. There's always kind of been if he would just take those shots a little bit more. And he's done that this year. And I think his ability to be dangerous from beyond the arc, but also the fact that he'll put it on the deck and go right by you now. And he'd always kind of been willing to dribble into the lane. It's just there wasn't always a plan. He would get there, and there's a 6'9" big, and he's got to pull it out, or he's got to kick it to the wing, or whatever. And now he's going up and under, or they're doing a great job bringing in the second offensive player that he can get a nice pass to there. It's just the evolution of this offense. It's Sanford, yes. It's making those 3-pointers. It's having rink mass back, but it's also very much like Sam can create and facilitate in a way that wasn't really there as a sophomore and a junior, and that has opened things up entirely.
I'll take you back to December 13th. Nebraska's in a tight game against Illinois, right? They've got a possession with a chance to win it on the road against a top 25 team, and who's got the ball in his hands as the clock is ticking down. In that moment in mid-December, I was surprised. I was scratching my head, and I questioned that decision. But look how it played out. He hit Jamarcus. Jamarcus hits a buzzer beater on the road, and it's one of the iconic moments in the season. Now, as we're deeper into the Big Ten campaign, if there's a got-to-have-a-bucket scenario for Nebraska, who's got the ball in his hands? It's Sam Hoiberg, and they let the clock tick down. And they just trust him to either get to the rim or to distribute the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And, he doesn't turn the ball over.
Yeah,
I think he leads the nation in assist to turnover ratio. It's like
he did at one point. Yeah.
It is so. Even if he's not scoring, he's not giving the ball away. So you're going to at least get a shot off, or your probability of getting a shot off or perhaps winning the game or scoring in that moment is pretty high, all because of the guy who has the ball in his hands. And that's not to say, like you think back to some, elite teams in the past, they just give the ball to their best player and they say, go score. Of course, Nebraska doesn't mind if Sam Hoiberg gets to the rim and scores, but he doesn't have to score. That's the interesting piece of what Nebraska does in these crunch time moments. And I don't feel like anybody like scoffs at the notion of Sam Hoiberg trying to go win a ball game right now or trying to score, with under a minute to go, down by 2.
Part of what makes Nebraska dangerous in those scenarios is they often have 4 to 5 guys on the court that can do it, depending on, if Prager is in or what you're doing with Berke in that spot. I mean, sometimes you're just bringing them off if you're playing to the last possession, and any of those 5 guys can win a game for you. And so with how Fred can draw up that offense or how they want to, attack whatever the defensive look they're getting, you have options. You got an option in the corner. You got an option cutting the basket. You got an option with Sam with the ball in his hands. You've got Jamarcus curling around a defender. It's all there. I mean, it's part of the success again is that they can play team basketball in a way that you don't always see in college basketball, especially when, and this isn't a knock on Tim Miles, but go back to the end of every basketball game that was close and late where Nebraska had the ball, and it was ISO, clear out, Turan Petaway, James Palmer, sometimes Ty Webster, is always dependent on that guy getting to a spot, getting to, a layup potentially, or trying to drive in and get a foul every single time. That's what it always was.
Mike, I'm going to share a story with you, and this is the Fred Hoiberg era, and it's maybe the most upset I've ever seen Nebraska's current head coach. It was the COVID year. So Nebraska's playing in an empty.
I know this.
You know where I'm going.
I know this.
Nebraska is playing in an empty Pinnacle Bank Arena. They've got a timeout with the basketball and a chance to win.
Illinois, right?
Illinois, you bet. Yeah. Fred draws something up in the timeout. They take the ball. They're at midcourt off on the side. They take it out right in front of Nebraska's bench. I don't know what Fred drew up, and no one knows what Fred drew up outside of the individuals that were in the huddle at the time, because what he wanted to have happen, it did not. Instead, Teddy Allen ran right over toward the inbounders, was screaming for the basketball, got it, tried to do something that was not on the play sheet that Fred had just designed, and Nebraska loses the game. Fred throws his piece of paper in the air, slams his hand on the scorer's table, and walks out. For a guy who doesn't show a whole lot of emotion, that was the moment for me where it was the most emotion. And it's because, he's a coach, right? He had something that he believed was going to create a look to possibly beat. And that was a really good Illinois team, by the way. Ayo Dosunmu, right. Kofi Coburn, Bishanishvili. That was a really good team. And Nebraska had him at home, and a chance for Fred at that point in time, he needed a big one. And he had an individual that wanted to try to make the play and be the hero, but that's not the way Fred wants the offense to work. Right. He wants his coaching to shine through. And, now we're seeing, and this is one of my biggest takeaways of this collection of players that Nebraska has that is 22-3. It's the collection of players, and Fred is able to move the chess pieces around. He doesn't have to just worry about, the one piece and making sure it's making all the moves. It all works together. And, one of my favorite quotes of the year was when Fred Hoiberg said that, I believe our offense is aesthetically pleasing. I've thought about that so many times. How many coaches can say that?
In college basketball?
Not a whole lot.
Less than 5, maybe?
They say, come watch Little Boozer. Come watch Kingston Flemings. They will mention their dude. Fred, of course he'd like to promote Price and Sam and Rink, but his offense is aesthetically pleasing. And if you watch it when it is humming, it is aesthetically pleasing. It's off of screens. It's running guys to the basket. They can create these slips and, get a layup, off the block. It's a great offense. And I would presume the fact that Nebraska has such balanced scoring and anybody can score in any moment, it's got to be very difficult for opposing coaches, because even in those timeouts, in the big moment, like the Illinois game on the road, and in a big moment against, Purdue when Nebraska's making its comeback, if you're Matt Payne or if you're Brad Underwood, what are you telling your guys defensively? You don't know what Nebraska is going to do. Plus, you have a coach who's coached in the NBA and has had to just figure out a way to X's and O's against a totally different style of basketball.
Yeah, so it presents what's going to be a fascinating matchup here tonight, where you get a Nebraska team that wants to play with some pace and they want to get up and down the court. They're not necessarily playing with the same pace that this Iowa team played at under Fran McCaffrey, but they want to move a little bit. And then you have an Iowa team who absolutely wants to slow it down. They want to grind the game down. They want to play through their defense. It's an Iowa team that overnight has gone from high-flying offense that could give up 99 points after it scores 98 to a team that is very balanced offensively, but plays at a very slow pace, wants to choke the life out of you defensively, has largely held teams under their scoring average all season long. I don't think there's many teams that have gotten above their scoring average against Iowa. And so it's a clash of styles in some regards. And then you have Nebraska, which, as much as we've kind of talked about both of it, but as good as their offense is, a lot of times it feels like it's a byproduct of how they played defensively. They set themselves up with their strong defensive play. And so this game, I've gone back and forth because it's in Iowa, and I think that gives Iowa a bit of an advantage. I've looked at Iowa and their wins and losses this year, and Nebraska would be by far the best team that they have beaten if they're able to get it done. And then you look at Nebraska, and they don't have a win over a team of Iowa's caliber since they beat Indiana, but they also have, 6 double-digit wins in that stretch and then lost to 3 top 10 teams. So it's just there's a lot happening here, and I'm kind of fascinated as you sort of break this down. What do you think you're going to see tonight in Carver-Hawkeye Arena?
Well, I think that you're going to see an inspired Iowa team because they're reeling a little bit right now. They haven't played that great over the past couple of weeks, but they can shoot it well, Mike. In fact, their field goal percentage is over 50%. They shoot it better than Nebraska does, and they're at home. So, Nebraska's defense they better bring it with them from Lincoln, because this is an Iowa team that I feel like is going to probably score some points. And that doesn't mean I think this game is going to be in the 90s, but I feel like, especially at the beginning, and Fred talks all the time about the way we start. Oftentimes a game is won and lost based on those first 5 minutes and setting the tone. That's what my eye is going to be on first and foremost with this game is what does the defense look like from the jump? If Nebraska has to play catch up on the road against an opposing crowd, it might be a little bit difficult. But I don't know that Iowa is as dynamic as Nebraska. If this game's played on a neutral court, right? And that's how I always try to evaluate teams and say, who's the better team? If Nebraska and Iowa play, like, let's just say they picked this game up and they played in Kansas City. I think Nebraska's favored by 8, if not 10. I think Nebraska is noticeably better than Iowa. But that's not to say that Nebraska is going to win this game because Iowa just has these different pieces. And you never know what the foul situation is going to be like. And I don't want to unpack the whole, let's scream at the refs because Nebraska's on the road. But sometimes that will dictate a lot of what happens and the rhythm of the game. Iowa does like to get to the free throw line. They'll score when the clock stops. I don't know. This is going to be fascinating. And beyond the intricacies of the way Nebraska and Iowa matches up, let's be honest, this is a huge game for Nebraska in terms of, Big Ten seeding, NCAA tournament seeding, where Nebraska may go. And if Nebraska can just continue to stack wins here down the stretch against teams that they're going to be favored over, it's really going to give them a lot of momentum as they go into March.
Yeah, and it's I've kind of talked about this. It's a bit of a it feels like a bit of a must win from just an entirely a vibes perspective, just to kind of show that you can get a win against a quality team right now. As I get emotionally choked up here, Kevin, feel free to take over.
Well, Iowa, Nebraska playing at Carver-Hawkeye, it's not an easy place for the Huskers to play. They played there 23 times, and Iowa's won 20 of the 23 games. In fact, the Huskers have won in Iowa City just once since 2012. So though it's not Mackey Arena and it's not the Breslin Center, it is a place that has given Nebraska some struggles in recent years.
Yeah, and they had that game last year where they had Iowa on the ropes early and then weren't able to put them away. Do you remember the one win that Nebraska had?
I don't. Hit me with the name. Is it Glenn Watson team?
No, it was actually Jamarcus Lawrence had a monster day in Iowa City for the 2021, 22, 22, 23 team. Sorry. Yep, 22, 23. We just have
Yeah,
an
I'm
audio.
drawing a blank on that one. The older I get, the harder it is to remember specific games.
I'm
Or
fairly
Nebraska Iowa
certain.
games are just so forgettable that sometimes they just all blend together.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain there was a charge that somebody took. I want to say it was Sam Hoiberg, and McCaffrey spent the entire TV timeout just staring at Kelly Pfeiffer, just staring at him, angry about this call that occurred late in the game. I think if people remember this, it was a big win for Nebraska because it got them to the chance that if they would have won in the Big Ten tournament against Minnesota, they could have played in the NIT and they would have finished, above 500 that year. And instead, they lost that game to Minnesota, and then the year following, they make their run to the NCAA tournament. But it was an important game at the time that it occurred. What I remember about that arena the most, Kevin, though, is that most of the time it feels like there is a 4 to 6 minute stretch of actual game time where Nebraska just doesn't score and Iowa piles it on. And we haven't seen a lot of stretches like that for this team, but we also haven't seen Iowa, this version of Iowa this year. We've seen the Fran McCaffrey that can score at will, and suddenly Nebraska is just struggling against a bad defensive team on the road. But it's going to be really interesting because if that building is loud and if that building is into it, and I expect them to be, and they're trying to choke the life out of you, the Nebraska team that struggled against Northwestern with all those turnovers, they can't show up tonight. They have to protect the basketball here.
Yeah, 100%. And is it me that Carver-Hawkeye Arena always just seems dark on television? Does it not?
Yeah.
And we're not
in the
just
same
saying
way that Illinois always looks orange on television, and the stupid marble floor of Williams Arena or Williams whatever in Minnesota always looks weird. Like the Big Ten arenas have their own lighting scheme, and it like throws me off. But yeah, it always looks dark. It's just like someone that has the lights partially dimmed.
It always looks dark. But then when I watch Iowa wrestling, it always looks bright. It's the weirdest thing for me. But yeah, there's going to be the blackout tonight. So, of course, it's going to look dark. And you mentioned the classic Nebraska scoring drought. I feel like that's been one of the recipes to success for Nebraska this year is, how often have you heard an announcer say, well, it's been 4.5 minutes since the Huskers have had a field goal? Like, I feel like they can just find a way to stem the tide when the offense starts to get a little bit sluggish. And I don't know if that's a credit to, Fred just having a design play to always get them out of a funk, or it's the shooting ability of Price Sanford, or it's the fact that they have the balanced scoring. It's not like they're just looking for Jamarcus Lawrence to try to come up with a bucket because they need a bucket to end an opposing team's run. I was got Bennett Sturts. He's a really good ball player. So that's the one thing that I think is pretty concerning here for Nebraska defensively. And you think about Sam Hoiberg and some of the challenges he's had defensively, and he's still putting up these awesome numbers. Like, let's not forget 1 week ago, Mike, as you're talking on your podcast about Nebraska Purdue. Like there's concern about how in the world are the Huskers going to slow down Braden Smith. Now, granted, he got his, but still, Sam did a pretty good job against the Big Ten's preseason player of the year.
If they showed up how Hoiberg wants them to show up at the beginning of the game, we're talking about a very different result for Nebraska Purdue. I mean, it's just that was one of those things where I feel like Purdue answered the bell right away, and it took Nebraska a while to get into it. Then they had their big comeback, and they weren't able to close it out in the end. But it was you're right. I mean, Braden Smith in the first half of that game versus Braden Smith's numbers for the total game look wildly different. I mean, he was shooting, I think, 70% from the field in the first half, and he shot under 50% for the game. I think he was like 3 of 9 from three-pointer. Hoiberg absolutely was able to kind of get to him. And that's what I mean. Like, they had that stretch where it just felt like once they jumped on top of Purdue defensively, suddenly Purdue really struggled with everything they were doing. And then Purdue helped out by missing an inordinate amount of free throws. You can't always rely on that. But that was a big part of this whole thing.
But that's the whole thing here. When Nebraska defends, they've got a chance. And, they just have a better likelihood of playing with the lead. And this team, as much as they don't blink at a deficit, they just play with a little bit different moxie when they have the lead. And you see a little bit more pep in Braden Frager's step, so to say. Yeah, and also with this game, I don't know if too many people are realizing the other huge game in the Big Ten tonight, Michigan-Purdue. If Purdue loses, which, they're hosting the number one ranked team in college basketball, who knows what's going to happen. But if Purdue loses, Nebraska is now back in front of Purdue in the Big Ten standings. So there's really a lot at play here for Nebraska with this ball game, because they could move up a spot in the Big Ten. And the Huskers have the favorable stretch. And I don't know how much you want to get into it, Mike, but everybody likes to watch all these NCAA basketball projections. And it has been fun, the fact that, when you saw them in late December, not everybody was rolling their eyes, because this is a pretty good basketball team. And you're like, no, let's see what people are thinking, because now Nebraska's in the polls, and now March doesn't seem like I'll believe it when I see it kind of thing. It's like, no, I've seen the team play, and I believe that it's going to happen already in December. And so week by week, you're monitoring where Nebraska is going to be. And the big thing with Nebraska, they won a 2 or a 3 seed. A 1's not out of the realm of possibility, because the schedule is so favorable down the stretch. And I'm not going to say Nebraska is going to go sweep the USC UCLA swing. That's going to be challenging, especially if USC is healthy. But there are going to be losses with some of the teams at the top of the rankings right now. If Nebraska can just stack wins with games that they are favored in, including tonight, the Huskers could end up with 26, 28. They could go 28-3 in the regular season.
Yeah.
That's a number 1 seed for the NCAA tournament. So
you would think
you're fascinated with the 2. You're fascinated with the 3. Don't leave out the 1, because I've got to believe that Arizona's got another loss in them, especially playing in the Big 12. Houston's going to lose again somewhere in the Big 12. I think UConn's going to lose somewhere along the way. Duke, I don't know. Duke's on the upper crust of the ACC. But there's a 1 seed still to be earned out there. And the way that Nebraska's schedule lines up, it could be the Huskers. And I'm not trying to just throw Kool-Aid down everybody's throat. I'm just saying this is a legitimate possibility for Nebraska basketball over the course of the next 3 weeks. For me, I also encourage fans not to get so obsessed with the 2, 3. Tell me where they're playing. I think that's truly what the biggest thing is. Are they going to Oklahoma City? Are they going to St. Louis? Those are the 2 big ones. You just hope they're not traveling out to Greenville, Buffalo. San Diego would be okay. I think that'd be a good number 3.
Sure.
And there's no designation to listen, Oklahoma City gets the 2. St. Louis gets the No, it's really about where the committee wants to place certain teams. If Nebraska continues to win, the more likely you are to stay at home. And the scoreboard watching that you should be doing shouldn't just be overall results. Iowa State, Kansas, Purdue, Illinois. It's those Midwestern teams.
Yep.
You need them to lose, because that's less competition you're going to have for
Texas
games
Tech
in
a little
St.
bit
Louis.
too.
What? Say that again?
If you can get Texas Tech out of the sort of 3-4 line as well, that would be helpful, because it's another option for Oklahoma City. We are actually going to dive into St. Louis. That is the site for this week's episode. We'll get your thoughts on Nebraska potentially playing in St. Louis, what St. Louis is as a basketball town, all that here in a little bit. But we are going to do, I warned you about this before, we're going to do the blind rankings now. And I kind of walked you through it. I let you know that I was going to give you a topic, and then I was going to throw some categories, or I guess, at you inside of that topic. And we will go with this: ways of which you can play poorly in a basketball game, as I cannot find my notes now that have my actual ones on here, but I remember them. All right. So what this is, and you'll get it here as we kind of go through it. So if you just envision someone playing poorly in a basketball game, or a team playing poorly in a basketball game, chances are they're doing one of these sort of factors. You're going to rank them 1 through 5, wherever you want to put them on the list, things that you think is most detrimental to the ability to win. And we will start with lackadaisical defense/effort. not putting enough effort in on the defensive end, or just letting a guy get into the lane, or sort of posting up, or any of that kind of thing. Not closing off the passing.
I'm going to go 4.
Okay.
Let's lock that in at 4 because you can overcome some of that with really good offense. Look at the NBA.
Okay.
They don't play defense in the NBA, right? So, yeah, you can still
Well,
win with suspect defense.
I think they played some defense. The shooting is that much better. All right, here's one. This is near and dear to Nebraska fans' hearts after watching Oscar Clough live in the lane and eat up the rebounds. Allowing a bunch of offensive rebounds.
Ooh, that sucks. Yeah, that's maddening because that kind of gets grouped in with the whole like second chance points, which, in football terms, turnovers, takeaways, points off turnovers. Offensive, I'm going to go 5. I'm going to put it behind lackadaisical defense.
Okay. Missed free throws.
Yeah, that's 2. You can't miss, right? No, make the free throws because that can kill you in crunch time too.
Can kill you in a number of ways. They're free. You just shoot the ball. Nobody can defend you in that moment. How about if we talk turnovers?
Yeah, that's number 1. When you mentioned the topic, that's the first thing that came to my mind was I knew you were going to tee up turnovers for me, and I knew you were going to say missed free throws. So that's my 1 and 2. I'm taking turnovers at the top. Don't turn the ball over. I've watched enough basketball, Mike, especially covering high school basketball, boys and girls, and even some lower level. If you turn the ball over, you're kind of toast.
All right. And so the last frustrating thing going on in a basketball game to contribute it with a loss. And at 1, you have turnovers. At 2, you have missed free throws. 3 is your open space. 4, you have lackadaisical defense effort. 5, offensive rebounds. Number 3 for you will be you just can't buy a basket. There's a lid on it. You can't make anything. Doesn't matter kind of where you're shooting from. Could be outside, could be inside. Just not a good enough shooting team.
I'm all right with the list. It's okay.
You nailed 1 and 2, I think. I think a lot gets made of the offensive rebounds because especially after watching what happened with Purdue, and some of it is you allow that many extra possessions, eventually they're going to be able to find their way into a basket. What has killed me with Nebraska is when they played in some of these games where it hasn't gone well for them, the turnovers. I just like it. They've been so good this year at handling the basketball, and you have a game like Saturday. Now they won by 19, but how many times do you think you'd have to add several games together to get to 18 turnovers for this Nebraska basketball team? And part of the magic for them is that they turn everybody else over. So they're taking extra possessions away from you and getting more shots off and able to create offensive that way, sometimes in the fast break. And so it's just the biggest thing. And it's every coach talks about it. And you mentioned it. You see it at every level. It's always the turnovers for me. The missed free throws are also, and especially coming out of that Purdue game, particularly aggravating.
Yeah, I don't know what the number was, but when Nebraska played at Purdue or at Minnesota, earlier this season, Fred in the post game was like, we just didn't take care of the basketball. I remember looking at the stat sheet going, like 12 turnovers. I've seen a heck of a lot worse than that, and you're griping about taking care of the basketball. But yeah, I think that it starts with Sam. Not that we need to continue to glaze on Sam Hoiberg, but he takes care of the basketball, and it helps the team out a lot.
Yeah, it's a Glaze reference on this podcast. That hasn't been uttered too much so far here. All right, let's take this to the city of St. Louis. So we've been going through all of these alphabetically. Started in Buffalo. We're now here at St. Louis. We're to the very, very end of this list. We'll finish with Tampa next week, and then we'll dive into Nebraska makes a Sweet 16. We'll start getting into some regional sites as well. So Kevin, St. Louis sets up as a Friday, Sunday. The price for a flight out there, if you choose to fly, it's not a bad drive. It's what, I don't know, from Lincoln, probably 5.5, 6. Yeah, 6, 7. You did that. You did that on the. We're getting Glaze and we're getting 6, 7.
That was completely unintentional.
Okay.
I would probably say it's 7, like from Lincoln, 7 hours. Yeah, I've made that drive many times, to be honest with you. And I love the fact that I'm on the week that you're talking about St. Louis. It's a city that I've frequented many, many times.
Well, and I feel like I know how you're going to feel about it as a location site for Nebraska as well because of it. But so it's a 7 hour drive, let's say from Lincoln, 6 hours from Omaha, and then if you were to fly it right now, you could get a flight leaving on Wednesday, coming back on Monday, ensuring that you'd be able to see everything, wouldn't miss any games, anything like that. Only around what I think. I had this pulled up at one point in time. I think it was only around 300, depending on which airline you were looking at that point in time. Yeah. So if you flew out Wednesday to Monday on Southwest, it's 296, 313 on United, 319 on Delta. These, of course, will all go up as soon as Nebraska is, chosen to be in St. Louis, if it were to be that way. But it's relatively inexpensive to get out there. Hotels, however, have shot up in cost. As someone who has booked a hotel in downtown St. Louis, it was more expensive than Oklahoma City. It was twice the cost of Portland. I'm downtown for around $1,200 for a single room for that duration from a Wednesday into Sunday. So it's a little bit expensive there, but this is one of the two drivable locations. I'm curious, do you think more Nebraska fans would show up in Oklahoma City or in St. Louis?
Oklahoma City, because it's right in that Big 12, the old Big 12 footprint. People are familiar with that. They're going to talk about Eskimo Joes, and they're going to reminisce about Nebraska playing all those football games down in Oklahoma. So there's just a warm and fuzzy part of the Oklahoma City trip, and it is fairly easy. And it's easier for people that are Nebraska basketball fans in Western Nebraska to get to Oklahoma City as opposed to St. Louis. So if you're, west of Grand Island and you want to go to St. Louis, we talk about the drivability of the St. Louis trip. It gets a little bit more challenging if you're, in the western part of the state of Nebraska. Yeah, I would say more people would look forward to going to Oklahoma City than St. Louis, but I think St. Louis, in my opinion, and that's the one thing about, thank you for sharing the airline prices. I think that's fascinating. Yes, they will go up, but when would you book the airline ticket? It wouldn't be until Selection Sunday. So having a drivable option just makes it for, if there's a working family that's thinking about, can we swing it on our budget? It might be really hard to fly somewhere, but it is so much more likely to drive somewhere, especially knowing some of the hotel costs, especially in St. Louis.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously people know about the Arch. They know about just in general, St. Louis is a city that's hosted events before, and so there's a lot going on. I know when I was there for a couple Cardinals games a few years ago, I enjoyed hanging out in the Soulard. I think I pronounced that right. The kind of the Soulard neighborhood in just south of downtown in St. Louis. There's some cool bars and kind of a neighborhood vibe down there. What do you like about St. Louis? And obviously, I mean, you've got a history with the place, and it's sort of I wouldn't say in between of Champaign, where you went to college, and Lincoln, where you're now at, but it's kind of along the way there.
Yeah, it's a pro
Depending on the
sports
route
town.
you choose.
Yeah, it's a pro sports town. I despise their baseball team. So happy that they're not going to be playing there because no one needs to go watch that product. But it is a fun town. I remember when the LA Rams were there playing football. Laclede's Landing is like their version of the Haymarket District. It's right along the river. It's really pretty. A lot of shops, a lot of good restaurants. There's some bars, and it's a really fun night scene. So if you happen to make the trip to St. Louis, Laclede's Landing, that's probably the place where you're going to wind up. And I guess if Nebraska were to go there, you could expect that like the Alumni Association or a pep rally or something's going to be hosted in that area. And it's a lot of fun, and it's walking distance from a lot of the hotels. And that's the one thing I would say in support of St. Louis as a potential site for Nebraska that can make it really appealing is once you get there, you don't have to commute too terribly far from where the games are going to be played to, entertainment to hotel. Everything is pretty compact, and it's right on the west side of the Mississippi River. East St. Louis, very different territory. I will say that.
Very different.
Yeah. Also, if there's one other thing that you'd want to do in St. Louis, that is the home to Anheuser-Busch, of course, and going to the factory, it is a great time. There are free samples. You get to see the Clydesdales. They will take you through like their entire brewing process. And, you know, it's massive. It's very fascinating. I've done it dozens of times, and each time I've really enjoyed it.
Amazingly, I've never even thought to consider that as something to do on like the in-between day. Should Nebraska be there? Should they get to the second round, or if you arrive early on Wednesday? Here's the Chat GPT summation of St. Louis as an NCAA tournament site this year, as I put in all of these. St. Louis is a blue-collar NCAA tournament stop. No nonsense, strong crowds, and built for long days of hoops. If your priority is watching great basketball without logistical headaches, this is one of the safest bets on the bracket. What do you think of that?
Sure, it told me nothing about St. Louis. So glad we could provide a service to offer a little bit. And the other thing too, you know, I don't know what the weather is going to be like in March in St. Louis, but there are a number of ways you can get on a ferry and go up and down the Mississippi River, and that can be a good time too. And
You're
I don't
selling
think
me on this a little bit.
you're not going to be bored.
Yeah.
I will say that. I think that it's and yeah, of course we have to mention the Arch. I frankly would tell you, yeah, if you want to go to the Arch and check it out just for the sake of crossing it off your bucket list, do it. Temper your expectations. It's not overly like, holy cow, I need to make sure I do that again. Once you do it one time, it's, you know, it's a great view of the city. Fantastic. Move along.
There's a lot to be said for you could just sort of see the Arch and take it in that way too.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of how I viewed the Statue of Liberty and several other considered landmarks that maybe lack the actual thing when you're there. All right, we rate them. How would you rate this on a 1 through 10 scale, St. Louis, as an option for Nebraska basketball fans traveling in March?
It's an 8.5. I think it's good. Solely from the perspective of it's drivable. Yeah, it's drivable. It has a lot to offer. It could be a really good time. The Friday, Sunday thing, you know, I'd rather it be Thursday, Saturday, to be honest, you know, because that's the first day of the tournament. You don't want to be driving on Friday or on Thursday and missing all the games. But hey, it is what it is. Maybe you go a day early and check out Nebraska's practice. Because, you know, if they play on Friday, they would be practicing open practices. Those are always a good time. I'll plug that right now, is those open practices, not only to watch your team that you're supporting, but just to watch some of the other players. It's the tournament. You're going to see good players. You're going to see good teams, and you're going to see some fan bases that maybe you're not too familiar with. And there's always good storylines all across the NCAA tournament bracket. So I would be curious whether Dayton, the winners in Dayton, would possibly get shipped to St. Louis based on geography.
Oh.
And plus it's Friday.
So that would put it in sort of that 3-6 category, because a lot of your winners are the 11 seeds.
Yeah, Friday. So it'd be like, and that would make sense for if you played earlier in the week, you would get the extra day. You wouldn't have to play on Thursday. You'd play Friday. So, you know, now that I think about it, I think that this is a very possible destination for one of the play-in winners.
Buffalo and Philadelphia aren't terrible for those teams either in that situation as well. I hadn't considered that, but if you were sent to like Portland from Dayton, that would be, you know, I hadn't thought about that from the prognostication standpoint. All right, we finish up Nebrasketball Tuesdays by looking at Joe Lenardi's hypothetical matchup that he puts out on Tuesday mornings. He has Nebraska down to a 4 seed, playing in Philadelphia against Yale. Kevin, what is your score prediction right now? Nebraska, Yale in Philadelphia.
I'll take Nebraska 91, Yale 70.
Ooh. All right. I think Yale slows things down quite a bit, if I recall correctly. So I'll say Nebraska 68, Yale 57. Maybe there's a little bit of uneasiness there, but Nebraska glides by with another double-digit win in a season full of them, which is, as someone who's watched a lot of Nebraska basketball, that shouldn't be discounted. The amount of times where you've just comfortably been able to stave off the last 4 minutes of a game and we get some Kendall Blue time, or there's some more Cale Jacobson excitement. That's pretty nice. I'm not going to lie to you, Kevin. I've watched a lot of Nebraska basketball where you have to sit there through the final 2 minutes wondering if they're going to hold on or if they can finish off a comeback.
Yeah, there
Not
have
really
been
the case this year.
there have been many years where the head to the exits crowd, it's a big deal because it's a two possession game and everybody's like, oh, 3 minutes left. This could still,
Mm.
it's not decided. Now the head to the exits crowd, and guilty as charged on this past Saturday from the Northwestern game, it's because the game is in hand. It's not always the case with Nebraska basketball. They've made it so you don't always have to sweat it out. That's not always the case. But it's just been a totally different season for Nebraska. Been so much fun. And Joey brackets has him as a 4. That is shocking to me.
Yeah, I don't really understand where he's coming from on some of this, but whatever. I think there's just a lot of discounting anything Nebraska's done prior to the last couple of weeks and a lot of heavy emphasis on teams that win a game, lose 2, but their win was so much better than their 2 losses. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. There's going to be a lot of cannibalism of teams that play each other, while Nebraska, if they just take care of business, even if they lose one of these games and they're 27-4, I mean, it is just remarkable what they have stacked up this season. So it all starts tonight, though. With Iowa, you get this game tonight, similar to if they would have taken care of business against Purdue. The feeling of where this season can go and the amount of wins that you can put together is really, really good.
Yeah, really my skepticism of the ESPN projection right now is just because I don't feel like it's evaluating what lies ahead for Nebraska.
Yeah,
because the schedule is what it is. You get Iowa twice. You have, over half of the remaining opponents are in the bottom half of the Big Ten.
Sure.
I do feel, how many games does Nebraska have left, Mike? 6, 7? Gosh,
they have 6 games left. They have 2. Yeah, you're really onto this.
I got to stop.
They had 2 against Iowa and then 2 against USC and UCLA. So they have 4 games out of their final 6 that are difficult, but they're all teams that, like, frankly, Nebraska has just proven to be better than that quality of team. The teams that they've run up against with issues have been the top 10 teams in the country. I mean, even Wisconsin, which is now playing at a great level, Nebraska beat that team by 30. Yeah. 30. They beat, they came back against Indiana. They came back on a bad night against Ohio State. Minnesota, which beat Michigan State, they flipped it on them in the second half and ran them out of their own gym. Like, there's a level of what Nebraska has done that I think has been discounted because they haven't gotten the critical wins against a Michigan, an Illinois, and a Purdue. And you step back and you think about it, and those are 3 of the 12 best teams in the country, counting Nebraska. Like, they 2 of them are 1 possession losses.
Top 10 teams, and look at what people are saying about those teams right now. Purdue could go deep. Illinois, some people are saying, are going to be in the national championship game just because of the size. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in Michigan's currently number 1 of the country. Of the 6 games that are left for Nebraska, what should people place on their hearts and minds right now as they look ahead? Can Nebraska go 6-0? Absolutely. Is that the expectation? I'd be cautious doing that because it's college basketball. They're right. Tired legs. Sometimes you just don't have it.
And it assumes health, which you should never do. I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah,
you want to be as healthy as you can be in March, but you just don't know what lies ahead.
That's very true. I think 4-2. I think fans should be pretty happy if Nebraska goes down the stretch here and wins 4 of these final 6 games, and that will put you at what on the season?
26-5.
Yeah, 26-5. They're pretty doggone good year. That I think is going to
very likely a top 4 seed double bye in the Big Ten.
Bingo. That top 4 seed in the Big Ten, and you're probably looking at a 3 in the NCAA tournament. A 3. There's a pretty good chance you could be St. Louis or Oklahoma City. I think that the road trip, USC, UCLA, I just feel really funny about the USC game because they're good. They're just not healthy. If they get healthy within the next couple of weeks, that's going to be a challenging game. And Mick Cronin, you never know what you're going to get with his team and what kind of complaint.
You're going to have a surly post game. He's going to be surly. That's what
exactly
you're
right. And then surly that leaves you. If you remove the 2 West Coast games, you've got 2 against Iowa, you got Penn State, you got Maryland. To do this team fair, give them say it's okay to lose one of those 4, and then again that gets you to that number of 26-5, and I think that's a fantastic spot to be for Nebraska.
Well, we will get to see how it all plays out here on Unemployed with Mike Schaefer on Nebrasketball Tuesdays. Kevin, thank you so much for your time. Apologies to everyone with the technical difficulties early on, but we got the ship righted. Kevin was fantastic, as I suspected he would be. This will probably not be the last time I hit you up to try to come on this, whether it's Nebrasketball Tuesday or any other version of what we got going on here on Unemployed. So,
Mike,
thank you so much.
I appreciate the opportunity to be on. It's been fun conversation. This basketball season been awesome. I'm going to credit you for not asking me about my AP Top 25 ballot. And if anybody out there is watching or listening and has sent me an email, just know that I look at it for 2 seconds and I hit delete. I get them from all over the country. I don't need it from Nebraska, okay?
Wow. I didn't realize people come after you for your AP ballot.
Oh, for crying out loud. Yeah. I have Houston. I have Houston lower than anybody else in the country of the ballots that are submitted this past week. And my inbox was from that window between, Monday at maybe noon to 4:00. Every 20 minutes, I'm getting a new one. And knock it off, people. Okay, this is my opinion. And then, not that I'm rooting, I enjoyed Iowa State Houston last night. It was a fantastic game. Who did I have one spot ahead of Houston?
Iowa State.
Great
3
game.
points ahead of them on the score line too.
Yeah.
So now, I want to say this as someone who has existed in the Nebraska college basketball bubble, where I follow Nebraska basketball. I follow the sport at large, but I don't lock in on it. I certainly am not online about Nebraska basketball in the way that I might have been with football. I am shocked at how angry every fan base seems to be all the time. There's just so much anger in this sport. It seems like there's more anger in college basketball and more dumb online arguments than there is in football. And that seems wild to me. Absolutely wild.
I'm happy you're getting that off your chest because it is so true. And there's one consistent, right? Every ref sucks. Every announcer sucks. And there's bias.
Oh, the announcers. I can think of one announcing team that I thought was bad this year. Everything else has been fine. And I don't genuinely let it, hit me too much. But if I never have to hear from a certain Peacock team again, I would be more than okay with that. And the more times we can get Kevin Kugler, obviously, the better. So, Kevin, go ahead.
College basketball in general, there are just gripes about anything and everything. And Nebraska, welcome to the party, now that they're relevant and, the voices are a little bit louder. And I've frankly enjoyed some of the back and forth, watching it unfold between Nebraska basketball fans because they have a good team to talk up. And then some of these other fan bases that try to big brother Nebraska basketball fans. Well, listen, this big brother team has 20, or the little brother team has 22 wins right now, and they are still in contention for a 1 seed for the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, it's great. They used to just only gripe about their own team. Now they get to gripe about everything else.
That's right.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. All right, everybody, we'll be back on Wednesday with Josh Peterson looking at college football. We're going to dive into some realignment talk, sort of envision what's next for a sport that never feels settled at any point in time. And I've got a blind rankings topic that Josh is going to love. We're going to reach back into his childhood and talk about some college football players from the 1990s. All of that on Unemployed with Mike Schaefer on Wednesday.